Can you be my friend for just one day?" That's all he said. 8 small words trembling in the humid evening air behind a barbecue joint on the edge of a sleepy southern town. The smell of ribs and motor oil drifted through the lot where a few road vipers were tuning their bikes, their chrome gleaming under the setting sun. It was their usual spot before a night run. The banter, the ribbing, the growl of engines. Nothing about that evening seemed unusual until the small voice cut through. They turned. By the chain-link fence stood a boy, maybe 10 years old, stocky, dark-skinned, with one arm wrapped in a cast covered in marker scribbles and faded initials. His other hand gripped a crumpled sheet of notebook paper. His sneakers were scuffed, his backpack frayed, his eyes too wise for his age. For a moment, no one spoke. Jamal King, the leader, broad-chested salt-and-pepper beard, calloused hands, watched him closely. The kid looked nervous, but not lost. More like someone who had already decided he had nowhere else to turn. "What did you say, little man?" Jamal asked. The boy swallowed hard. "Tomorrow's buddy day at school," he said. "We have to bring a buddy." "I don't have any." The chatter around the lot died. Bottles paused halfway to lips. Someone muttered, "Did he just say he doesn't have a buddy?" Jamal took a slow breath. He'd seen plenty in his life. Bar brawls, memorials, betrayals, but never a boy asking a crew of bikers to be his buddy. The kid stepped closer, holding out the paper. "I drew this," he said quietly. Jamal took it, a marker drawing. Motorcycles in every shade lined up under the words "My Crew." The skull and flame logo was there too, sloppy but unmistakable. "You drew this?" Jamal asked. The boy nodded. "They said, 'Road vipers are trouble.'" "But you look cool." The group went silent again, for men used to side eyes and whispers. Hearing those words from a shaking kid felt like a punch to the gut. Jamal crouched, eyes level with the boy. "What happened to your arm?" "I crashed a scooter trying to pop a wheelie like them." He looked down. They laughed, called me Tin Boy, said, "Nobody wants a busted buddy." One biker cursed low. Another shook his head. Jamal studied the cast, cracked, worn, covered in kid signatures. "What's your name?" "Malik." "Well, Malik," Jamal said, "you got nerve walking up to us like that?" Malik shrugged. "My Nana says I act before I think." That earned a few laughs. It cut the tension for just a second. But Jamal saw something deeper in those eyes. Not just hurt, but fight, clinging to life. He looked at his crew. "So the kid needs a buddy for a day." Rocco, the biggest of them, grumbled. "You serious, Jamal? We can't just roll up to a school. They'll call the cops." Another biker laughed nervously. "Imagine 70 bikers showing up for Buddy Day." But Pops, the oldest, leaned forward. "Doesn't sound like anyone else is showing up for him." That sentence hung in the air like smoke. Jamal looked back at Malik. "Where's your mom, kid? She works all the time. 2 jobs. Your dad?" Malik's face shifted. "He gone. No one said a word after that." Jamal reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small spare patch, a miniature of their famous emblem. He placed it in Malik's good hand. "Consider this yours," Jamal said. "You're one of us for today." Malik's eyes widened. "For real?" "Yeah, for real." A flicker of a grin appeared on the boy's face. Small, shaky, but enough to light the whole lot. "So?" he asked hopefully. "You'll come." Jamal hesitated. He knew the headlines that could follow, the stares, the rumors, but then he remembered his own childhood, being the kid who didn't belong anywhere. He nodded slowly. "We'll see, little man." That was all Malik needed. His eyes brightened, his shoulders squared, and for the first time that evening, he looked proud. "Thank you," he said softly. "Even if you don't come, thanks for hearing me." He turned to leave, walking down the street with his backpack slung from one shoulder. When he reached the corner, he stopped, looked back, and waved. Jamal raised a hand in return. No one spoke until the boy vanished around the block. Then Rico muttered, "Damn kid's bolder than most adults." Rocco snorted, "Yeah, but we can't just show up, Jamal. You know how folks see us." Jamal didn't answer. He kept staring down the empty road, the drawing still in his hand. He saw himself in that boy, the craving for connection, the silent sting of being overlooked. Finally, he whispered almost to himself, "Buddy Day, what a trip." The others went back to their bikes, pretending to tinker, but their faces had shifted. Something had cracked open in that lot, something nobody expected. A little boy with a broken arm had stepped into their world and left a dent they couldn't ignore. He didn't ask for cash. He didn't ask for pity. He just wanted to belong, even if only for one day. And behind that barbecue joint, under the scent of smoke and coffee, a group of men who thought the world had already labeled them began to wonder what it would mean to show up for him, because maybe deep down they remembered what it felt like to be that kid, standing alone, hoping someone, anyone, would say yes. The lot stayed quiet long after Malik disappeared down the street. The engines were cold now, and the only sound was the breeze brushing against the row of bikes. For once, the men who usually filled the evening with laughs and noise had nothing to say. Jamal leaned against his Kawasaki, arms crossed, eyes lost somewhere far away. The crumpled drawing still rested in his hand. The paper was soft now, smudged from his thumb. He kept looking at it, tracing the wobbly lines of motorcycles drawn by a boy who just wanted to belong. Rocco broke the silence first. "You're not really thinking about it, are you?" Jamal didn't answer. "Come on, man," Rocco said, shaking his head. "We ride into that school, it's done. Cops, parents, cameras. We'll look like chaos crashing a picnic." Pops lit a cigarette and blew smoke toward the twilight sky. "We already look like chaos," he said quietly. But that kid didn't see it that way. Rico, the youngest of the group, leaned on his handlebars. "Kid's fearless. Reminded me of myself before I learned better." Jamal finally spoke. "Before you learned what?" Rico shrugged. "That folks don't care, Jamal. You grow up. You stop asking anyone to show up. That's how it goes." Nobody replied. The words hung in the air, raw and familiar. Jamal's voice softened. "That's the issue, Rico. The kid still believes someone might." He looked back down at the drawing. 70 bikes, a sun in the corner, stick figure men with flames on their backs, childish, messy, pure. Pops exhaled smoke through his nose. "Maybe it ain't about the school. Maybe it's about the kid knowing somebody hurt him." Jamal nodded slowly. "Maybe. But hearing ain't the same as showing up." That sentence hit them all. They'd all known people who talked big and vanished when it counted. They'd all been left behind at some point by friends, by family, by the world. Jamal stuffed the drawing into his vest pocket and grabbed his helmet. "Let's take a ride." "Where?" Rocco asked. "Nowhere special?" They rode. Engines roared to life, filling the small town with thunder. Streetlights flickered. Dogs barked from porches. But the noise wasn't for show. It was to think. The only way these men knew how. They rode through the quiet streets, past the middle school Malik had mentioned. The building was low with peeling paint and a playground that had seen better days. Jamal slowed down as they passed, eyeing the empty yard. He imagined what tomorrow would look like, the kids pairing up, laughing, shouting, and Malik standing alone, pretending not to care. Jamal's chest tightened. They rode on, heading towards the edge of town where the road stretched wide and the air smelled like pine and open fields. The ride was silent. No music, no talk, just the hum of engines and the rhythm of thoughts none of them said out loud. When they stopped at a gas station miles away, Jamal didn't get off his bike right away. He just sat there staring at nothing until Pops walked up beside him. "You're thinking about him?" Pops said. Jamal gave a small laugh. "You'd think I was the one with a broken arm." Pops smirked. "Maybe you are, just not the kind that needs a cast." The line made Jamal grin for a second, then fade. "You ever notice," he said quietly, "how we scare folks until they need us?" Pops nodded. "Yeah. Then we're the heroes for 5 minutes and back to villains again. That kid didn't see that." "Nope." Pops tossed his cigarette. "That's what makes it sting." They stood there for a moment, the sound of the wind mixing with the faint rumble of traffic. Back at the barbecue joint that night, the rest of the crew had gathered again. Same stools, same sweet tea, but the vibe had changed. Nobody talked about runs or plans. The conversation kept circling back to the boy. Rocco was pacing near the counter. "We shouldn't even be thinking about this. You know how folks are. They see one of us and it's all headlines. Bikers storm school." "Storm?" Rico scoffed. "It's not a damn takeover. It's Buddy Day. We'd be the friendliest guys there." Laughter rippled through the room, quick but nervous. Lee, who rarely spoke, finally said, "You ever think maybe this is exactly what folks need to see us? Not as what they think we are, but what we really can be." Rocco rolled his eyes. "And what's that?" "Babysitters." Lee didn't flinch. Human. The word landed like a slap. Jamal took a sip of tea, his reflection rippling on the surface of the glass. "He asked for 1 day," he said finally. "Not a lecture, not money, just 1 day." Pops leaned back in his chair. "So what's stopping us?" Jamal sighed. "Everything." The group fell silent again. Outside, the sky was turning purple, the kind of sunset that makes you think too much. Jamal reached into his vest and pulled out Malik's drawing again. He smoothed it out on the table. "Look at this," he said. "The kid thinks we're heroes." Rocco snorted. "That's his first mistake." But no one laughed. Jamal kept his eyes on the paper. "You know what's funny? We spent half our lives proving we're not villains, but we never try to be heroes either." Pops grinned faintly. "You trying to give a speech?" "Jamal? Maybe." He looked around. "We can't fix the world. Hell, we can't even fix ourselves half the time. But maybe we can fix one morning for one kid." The room stayed quiet for a beat. Then Rico said softly, "That's not nothing." Lee nodded. "It's something." Rocco groaned, rubbing his face. "You guys are losing it. You really going to ride up there in full gear? What? Hand out juice boxes to kids?" Jamal smirked. "Nah, maybe just some respect." That night, the clubhouse lights stayed on longer than usual. Conversations came and went in low tones. The smell of leather and oil filled the air, mixed with the tension of a decision none of them wanted to make too quickly. Jamal sat at the bar, the drawing in front of him, a glass of sweet tea growing warm beside it. He stared at the crooked handwriting, crew rides together. It wasn't perfect, but it said everything. He thought about Malik's scuffed sneakers, his trembling voice, the way he'd looked back before turning the corner. That kind of hope didn't last long in the world, and Jamal couldn't stand the thought of being one more adult who let it die. Rocco walked over, shaking his head. "You really think this is worth the hassle?" Jamal didn't answer right away. He looked up, eyes tired but steady. "You ever been asked for something that small?" And realized it meant everything. Rocco didn't reply. He just stared back, then turned away with a grunt. The room fell quiet again. Only the soft hum of a jukebox filled the air. Finally, Jamal stood. "I'm writing tomorrow. Anyone who doesn't want to come, don't. No speech, no plan, just that." Pops smiled under his beard. "Then I guess we're all writing." One by one, heads nodded. The decision had been made, not by orders, not by pride, but by something deeper. No one talked about how the town would react or what it might cost them. None of it mattered now because somewhere in that sleepy southern town, a 10-year-old boy was sitting in his room, maybe staring at a patch, maybe wondering if anyone would really show up. And for the first time in a long time, a group of men who thought they were done changing felt something stir, something small, something human. It wasn't about image or reputation. It wasn't even about redemption. It was about a promise that had never been spoken, but already made. A boy had asked, and somewhere deep inside, they all knew the answer had already been yes. The barbecue joint lights were dim when Jamal stepped outside that night. The air was thick, quiet, heavy, with the kind of silence that makes a man think too much. He kept seeing that small face, Malik's wide eyes, his broken arm, and that shaky grin that shouldn't have belonged to a 10-year-old. He didn't sleep. Instead, he rode. Pops and Rico joined him, no questions asked. The three of them rolled through town, engines low, lights cutting across the dark streets until they reached the rougher side. Jamal didn't need directions. He just knew. They stopped in front of a weathered duplex. The windows glowed with old TV light, and on the porch railing hung a tiny scooter missing a wheel. Jamal killed the engine and walked up the steps. A woman answered the door halfway. Tired eyes, uniform still on from a late shift. "Yes, evening, ma'am," Jamal said softly. "Name's Marcus, but folks call me Jamal. We met your boy today." Her eyes softened. "You're the bikers." "Yes, ma'am." She hesitated, then opened the door. "I'm Keisha. Come in before the neighbors start talking." The apartment was small but clean. 2 rooms, a thrift store couch, the smell of soap and coffee. On the table lay a worksheet titled, "Buddy Day Interview. Ask Your Buddy." 3 questions. The lines were empty. Malik appeared from the hallway, pajamas cast, hair still damp. When he saw them, his mouth fell open. "You came," he said. "Just checking in?" Jamal said with a smile. Keisha folded her arms. "He doesn't usually get visitors. You'll have to forgive the surprise." Jamal nodded. "Mind if we ask what happened?" Malik glanced at his mom. She nodded. He looked down at his cast. "I crashed Mr. Johnson's scooter. I wanted to show the kids I could wheelie, but when I fell, they didn't help." "They laughed." "Laughed?" Pops repeated, frowning. Malik nodded. "They call me Tin Boy. Tap my cast when I walk by. It's like, I don't count." Jamal's throat tightened. He'd heard laughter like that before. The cruel kind, meant to remind you where you don't belong. "Mr. Thompson, the custodian, found me." Malik continued. "He used to ride a bike, too. He said I reminded him of himself. He came to see me in the hospital. No one else did." Jamal noticed Keisha looked down, shame flickering behind exhaustion. "She works 2 jobs, Malik added quickly. "I know she wanted to." Keisha smiled weakly. "He's always making excuses for me." Jamal chuckled softly. "Good son." Then serious again. "And tomorrow's buddy day." Malik nodded. "You're supposed to bring a buddy. Take a picture. Write something nice. Nana came last year, but she's sick. I didn't want to be the only one again." He looked up, eyes hopeful. "I thought maybe you could come." "But you don't have to. I know you're busy." That last line cracked every man in the room. Jamal cleared his throat. "Malik, what you asked for. That's not small. It takes guts to ask for help." Malik shrugged. Nana says brave just means scared, but doing it anyway. Pops smiled. Smart Nana. Keisha finally spoke. Look, I know how folks see you men. Leather, tattoos, noise. They don't see what he saw, but when he came home with that patch, he stood taller. Jamal nodded. Ma'am, if we come tomorrow, we'll come with respect. Quiet, careful, just to make sure he's not alone. She hesitated, then smiled. You'd really do that. We'll make sure the school and police know, Jamal said. No surprises. Thank you, she whispered. He needs something good. Malik grinned wide. So, you'll come? Jamal met his eyes. Yeah, kid. We'll come. The boy's smile could have lit the whole room. Outside, Pops muttered. You sure about this? Jamal zipped his vest. No, but we're doing it anyway. Back at the clubhouse, a few more men were waiting. The story spread quick. The crash, the bullies, the custodian, the empty paper on the table. Lee spoke first. We go in peace. Helmets off, no engines roaring. We're there for the kid, not the crowd, Rocco grumbled. Folks will freak out when they see us. Then let them, Pop said. Maybe they'll finally see who we really are. That shut everyone up. Jamal looked at the drawing pinned on the wall. Malik's shaky marker bikes, the words crew rides together scrolled at the top. He tapped it with one finger. This is what we're riding for. They started making quiet calls. Lee reached the police station, explaining it was for a school event. The officer on duty remembered the group from a charity run. Keep it calm and we'll stay back, he said. Keisha texted the principal, warning her in advance. No trouble, just kindness, she wrote. By midnight it was set. No roaring, no headlines, just presence. Before turning in, Jamal stood in the empty clubhouse and stared at the drawing one more time. Crew rides together, he murmured. For a man who had spent his life leading riders across miles of asphalt, this was the first time that line meant something real. He turned off the light, walked outside, and breathed in the humid night air. The bikes gleamed faintly under the moon, a line of chrome and shadow waiting for dawn. Somewhere across town, a boy was falling asleep with a patch under his pillow, and a little hope finally stitched back together. And for the first time in years, Jamal felt like the road ahead might actually lead somewhere worth going. The morning came muggy and warm, the kind of morning that made you want to stay inside with the AC and forget the world existed. But at the Road Vipers clubhouse, the lights were already on, and the smell of coffee and motor oil filled the air. Jamal stood at the long metal table in the center of the room. A map of the town spread out in front of him, around him. The men were gathering one by one. Boots thudding, mugs clinking, engines rumbling outside. Nobody was joking this time. The laughter that usually came with morning coffee had been replaced by something heavier. Purpose. Rocco walked in first, rubbing his hands together. You really going to do this, Jamal? Jamal didn't look up. We said we would. Pops came next, a toothpick hanging from his mouth. We talked to the school. Principal's nervous, but said as long as we behave, she won't call the cops. Rico added. Police know too. They'll be watching from across the street just in case. Rocco snorted. Just in case we start a riot at a middle school. Just in case someone panics, Jamal said. Can't blame him. We're not exactly the poster boys for quiet mornings. He folded his arms and looked around the room. This isn't about us. It's about a kid who asked for something simple, for someone to stand next to him. Pops nodded. Then we stand. Jamal smiled faintly. We stand. The plan wasn't complicated. It never is when the heart's in the right place. They'd meet at the barbecue joint at 7 a.m. Ride slow, no engines roaring, no smoke, no noise, just presence. They'd park on the edge of the schoolyard, line up clean, helmets off, hands open. "I don't want one wrong look," Jamal warned. "Not one cigarette, not one word that makes a teacher nervous," Rocco grumbled. "So basically you want us to act like choir boys?" Jamal's eyes narrowed. "Just for a day?" That made the room chuckle low and short, but it broke the tension. They started preparing. Jackets brushed clean, bikes polished until the chrome looked like mirrors. Some of the men brought small gifts, stickers, extra helmets, a new backpack Pops had picked up that morning. None of them said it out loud, but they all knew what this meant. For men used to being feared, they were about to do something that required more courage than any bar fight or back-road brawl. They were about to be seen differently. By 6:30, the clubhouse buzzed like a beehive. Lee adjusted the flag on his bike's backrest. Rico filled a thermos for Jamal. Rocco muttered to himself about public image makeovers, but even he looked sharper than usual. Pops walked up beside Jamal, looking out the window where dawn was breaking faintly behind the pines. "You sure about 72 bikes, Jamal?" Jamal rubbed his chin. "We won't all go in. Half of them can ride behind. Stopped down the road enough to make an entrance. Not a scene." Pops nodded. "Smart." Rico checked his watch. "You think the boy's ready?" Jamal smiled. "I think he's been ready his whole life. He just needed someone to show up." They rolled out just before sunrise. The engines hummed, not roared. The air carried a warmth that stuck to the skin, but woke you up better than coffee ever could. The line of motorcycles stretched for blocks, black, red, and chrome, weaving like a silent river through the waking town. People came out of porches and driveways, eyes wide, some waving, some staring. A few pulled out phones. The sight of so many road vipers riding in formation wasn't something you saw every day, especially not this quietly, this purposefully. Jamal led the line, Pops on one side, Rico on the other. Rocco grumbled from the back, but never slowed down. By the time they reached the barbecue joint parking lot, the place looked like a movie scene. Sunlight breaking through thick clouds, steam rising off coffee cups, the smell of ribs and exhaust mixing in the air. Jamal parked first, pulled off his helmet, and called the group together. "All right, listen up," he said. "This isn't about scaring anyone or making a show. You keep your cool. You smile if someone looks at you and you remember who this is for. One boy, one morning. That's it." Rico raised his thermos. "To the kid." The group echoed softly. "To the kid." They mounted up again, engines low and steady, and headed toward the school. The road curved gently through the center of town, past the grocery store, past the gas station, past the little barber shop where old men were already reading newspapers. As they rode, more people looked up. Some smiled, others whispered, but for once, nobody pointed with fear. At the front, Jamal's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. He wasn't thinking about reputation or judgment or what people might post online later. He was thinking about a small boy tying his shoes that morning, wondering if anyone would come. When they reached the school's main street, Jamal slowed the group down even more. The first students were already outside, backpacks slung over their shoulders, laughter spilling through the humid morning air. Some noticed the bikes first. "What the?" one kid whispered, elbowing his friend. "Is that the road vipers?" Within seconds, phones were out, eyes wide, mouths open. Teachers stepped out of the doors, squinting into the sun. A security guard walked forward, radio in hand, hesitating when he saw the police car already idling by the curb. The officer behind the wheel, a local named Reed, stepped out, smiled slightly, and gave a small nod to Jamal, the kind that said, "We talked. You're clear." Jamal nodded back. He motioned with one hand, and the bikes began to line up across the curb in perfect formation. Engines idled, then shut off one by one until all that remained was silence and the clicking of cooling metal. And then, down the walkway, a small figure appeared. Malik. He wore his best clothes, a striped shirt buttoned wrong at the top, jeans that were just a little too short, and his cast freshly decorated with new drawings. In his good hand, he held the little road viper's patch Jamal had given him. His eyes widened when he saw them. The boy froze for a second, unable to move. Jamal stepped off his bike and waved him over. "Morning, little man." Malik started walking, then jogging, then running. He reached Jamal and stopped, breathless, looking up. "You really came." Jamal smiled. "Told you we would." The boy's eyes darted from one side to the other. Rows of bikes, leather jackets, grizzled faces softened by smiles. Rocco bent down. "You the reason I had to shave this morning?" Malik giggled. "You didn't shave very well." Laughter broke through the line. Warm, real human. Jamal knelt beside him. "Ready for school?" Malik nodded, gripping the patch tighter. "Yeah, I think so." "Good," Jamal said. "Then let's walk you in." The teachers didn't know what to do. Some froze, some whispered. The principal stood on the steps, hands clasped, trying to process what she was seeing. A boy with a broken arm walking toward the doors, flanked by a wall of bikers. And yet, no one looked scared anymore because something in the air had changed. There was no chaos, no threat, just presence. The engines quiet, the sunlight glinting off chrome, and in the middle of it all, a 10-year-old kid walking taller than he ever had before. The moment didn't need words. It was a kind of peace you could feel. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't demand, it simply shows up. The men stood by as Malik reached the school doors. He turned back to Jamal and said softly, "You can come inside too, right?" Jamal looked toward the principal, who hesitated, then smiled faintly and nodded. "Yes, he can." Jamal placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Then lead the way, partner." And as they walked into that school together, the world outside grew quiet enough for everyone watching to feel something they hadn't felt in a long time. Respect. Not the kind you demand. The kind you earn by simply keeping your word. The town heard them before it saw them. Not the deafening thunder people expected from a biker ride. This sound was deeper, slower, more respectful. A low hum that carried through the warm morning air, steady as a heartbeat. Shop doors opened. A mail carrier froze beside his truck. Parents waiting in driveways turned to look as 70 motorcycles rolled through the small streets of the sleepy southern town. They weren't there to make noise. They were there to keep a promise. At the front of the line rode Jamal King, his eyes steady, his jaw calm. Pops and Rico flanked him on either side, and the rest followed like a wave of steel and leather. They didn't rev the engines or shout. They rode in silence, the sunlight bouncing off polished chrome like a slow-moving sunrise. When they turned onto the school's street, the chatter of kids and the sounds of mourning fell away. One by one, the bikes eased to the curb. Engines clicked off. The air filled with the soft tick of cooling metal. And then quiet. Every head turned. Teachers peered through the windows. Parents clutched coffee cups. Kids stopped mid-laugh, their mouths open, unsure what they were seeing. And then the doors of the school opened, and Malik appeared. His hair was neatly combed, shirt tucked in, cast newly drawn on with stars and words of encouragement. He carried a little patch in his good hand, the same one Jamal had given him. His eyes went wide when he saw them lined up across the yard like sentinels of chrome. He froze for a moment, then whispered, barely audible. They came. Jamal took off his helmet and smiled. "Morning, partner." Malik walked toward him slowly, then faster, then broke into a run. He stopped right in front of Jamal, his face glowing with disbelief. "You really came," he said, almost out of breath. Told you we would, Jamal said. Behind them, the men stood straight, helmets under their arms, jackets zipped up, hands open. There were no cigarettes, no smirks, no jokes, just quiet respect. Rocco, the biggest of them all, grunted. You're the reason I had to shave this morning, kid. Malik giggled. You missed a spot. A low, warm laugh rolled through the line, the kind that didn't need to be loud to fill the air. The principal stepped outside, nervous but curious. The police officer on duty, Officer Reed, gave Jamal a nod of understanding. Everything was in order. No trouble, no surprise, just presence. Jamal knelt so he was eye level with Malik. You ready for your big day? Malik nodded, smiling so wide it almost cracked his face. Good, Jamal said. Let's walk you in. They moved together, Jamal on one side, Pops and Rico a few steps behind. The men didn't form a wall around him. They formed a path, one that said, You belong here. Teachers stepped aside. Kids whispered, but no one laughed. The bullies who once called him names just stared, small in the shadow of something bigger than them. Not fear, but integrity. Malik's footsteps sounded louder than usual on the pavement, steady and sure. The patch he carried brushed against his leg with every step, and for once that broken arm didn't look like something to hide. Inside the doorway, the principal found her voice. Good morning, Malik. Good morning, ma'am, he answered. She looked at Jamal. Thank you for coming. Thank you for letting him have this, Jamal replied. In the hallway, the air smelled like crayons and floor wax. A banner hung from the ceiling. Buddy Day. Celebrate kindness. Jamal paused at the classroom door. You want us to come in? He asked. Malik thought for a second, then nodded. Yeah, I want them to see. The class fell silent when they entered. Some kids leaned back in their seats. Others just watched. His teacher, Ms. Hayes, blinked in surprise, but managed a soft smile. Well, class, she said, this is Malik and his buddy. Jamal nodded once. Morning, morning, came a few murmurs back. Malik took his seat, shoulders square, chin up. The boy who once hid behind his cast now looked like he'd found his own armor. On his desk was a worksheet titled, My Buddy and Me. He picked up a pencil and wrote carefully what I admire. He keeps his word, what he taught me. Ask anyway. Ms. Hayes watched in silence, her smile trembling. In the back, Jamal leaned against the wall. He'd led men through fights, storms, and funerals, but never something like this. Somehow standing in a fifth-grade classroom beside a kid who just found his voice felt like the most important thing he'd ever done. Outside, a few bikers who stayed with the bikes talked to curious kids and parents. Are those real flames? One boy asked. Only if you don't do your homework, Rocco said straight-faced. Laughter broke the tension. A teacher whispered to another. They're actually polite. Yeah, her friend answered. Maybe we judged too fast. Jamal turned towards the hallway where the custodian, Mr. Thompson, had stopped his cart mid-roll. Their eyes met, and the older man smiled. He gave Malik a small salute. The boy saluted back. Two riders, decades apart, connected by understanding. When Buddy Day's morning circle began, Letter Kid shared who they brought, a sibling, a grandparent, a friend. Then came Malik's turn. He stood cast across his chest and said simply, My buddy is Jamal. He listens. He showed up. No one clapped. They didn't need to. The silence in that room was louder than applause. Jamal felt something tightened behind his ribs. Not pride, not ego, but a kind of peace he hadn't felt in years. When it was time to go, the men waited by the doors. Jamal leaned down to Malik. We'll stop by Fridays, help you fix that chain on your scooter. Malik grinned. You promise? Jamal smiled. You already know the answer to that. As they stepped outside, the sunlight hit the row of bikes like a stage light. The engines came alive again, but softer this time. A heartbeat instead of thunder. Malik stood on the steps and waved, the wind blowing his hair across his forehead. Every biker lifted a hand in return. The engines rolled away slow and smooth down the main road, and the people who watched didn't see outlaws that morning. They saw men who had kept a promise to a boy who believed they would. For a few long seconds after the bikes left, the schoolyard stayed frozen. Nobody knew whether to cheer, talk, or even breathe. The sound of the engines faded down the street, leaving behind a kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt full. Inside, the students buzzed with energy. Every hallway echoed with whispers. Did you see them? Were those really road vipers? They came from Malik. Some teachers tried to steer the excitement back toward math and reading, but the day had already changed shape. No one could go back to normal after watching 70 bikers show up just to keep one boy company. Malik sat at his desk, still holding the pencil he'd used to write. He keeps his word. His cheeks hurt from smiling. For the first time, the air around him didn't feel heavy. He wasn't invisible anymore. But change, even the good kind, makes people nervous, and nervous people often react in ways they later regret. At recess, Malik walked out to the playground, cast and all. The sunlight hit the metal slides and laughter filled the yard. He was halfway across the black top when he heard a voice behind him. Well, look who thinks he's famous. He turned. Tyler, the same boy who had once called him Tin Boy, stood with two friends. They weren't laughing this time. They just looked uneasy, like they didn't know how to handle what they'd seen that morning. Malik's stomach tightened, but he stood still. Bet you think you're special now, huh? Tyler said, kicking at the dirt. Bringing a gang to school, trying to scare people. I didn't bring them, Malik said quietly. They came. The tone of his voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even defensive. It was calm. And that calm unnerved Tyler more than yelling ever could. One of Tyler's friends muttered, "Man, my dad said, they're dangerous." "They're not," Malik replied. "They're my crew." That made Tyler laugh, short and sharp. "Crew? You don't even know them." Malik looked him in the eye. "I didn't know you either, but you still laughed when I fell." For a moment, Tyler had no answer. His face went red. "Whatever," he muttered and turned away. His friends followed, but slower than before. Something in the way Malik had said it, not angry, not small, made them rethink their steps. Ms. Hayes, watching from the steps, saw the exchange. She didn't step in. She didn't need to. Some lessons don't need teachers, they just need witnesses. That afternoon, when the final bell rang, the school felt different. The kids left in groups, chattering about motorcycles and leather jackets. Malik walked home alone, but it didn't feel lonely. He was halfway down the block when a car slowed beside him. It was a white sedan. The principal, Mrs. Brooks, she rolled down her window. "Malik, you doing all right?" "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I wanted to thank you again for this morning," she said, "and to apologize if we've overlooked things." Malik frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "You told your teacher about the bullying before, didn't you?" Malik nodded slowly. "A few times." She looked away for a second, ashamed. It shouldn't have taken motorcycles for us to listen. He didn't know what to say, so he just shrugged. "It's okay." "No," she said. "It's not. But maybe we'll fix it now." When she drove off, Malik kept walking, thinking about how sometimes grown-ups say sorry without saying the word. That evening, Jamal stopped by the barbecue joint where everything had started. The place buzzed with conversation. Customers who had seen the news, locals replaying the moment over sweet tea. Someone had already posted a picture online. Road Vipers escort boy to buddy day. It was spreading fast. When Jamal walked in, the waitress grinned. "You started something, you know that?" He smiled back. "Hopefully something good. Everyone in town's talking about it. Even the sheriff stopped by. Said it was the quietest school morning he's ever seen." Jamal nodded. "Quiet's a nice change." As he left the barbecue joint, he saw a small figure sitting on the curb outside. Malik. "Hey, partner," Jamal said, sitting down beside him. "Didn't expect to see you here." Malik smiled. "Mom's still at work. I came to draw." He held up a sketchbook. On the page was a drawing of the morning's ride, dozens of bikes, the school in the background, and a small figure in a cast standing at the front. Jamal whistled. "You've got talent, kid." Malik shrugged, proud but shy. "It's easier to draw things I remember." "Good memory to keep," Jamal said. "How'd the rest of the day go?" Malik hesitated. "Okay, some kids were weird about it, but it's fine." Jamal studied his face. "Weird how?" "They just don't know what to think yet," Malik said. "Maybe they will," Jamal smiled. "You sound older than me sometimes." "I don't think so," Malik replied. "You just sound tired." That made Jamal laugh. A deep, honest laugh he hadn't heard from himself in years. "You might be right about that." As they sat there, Pops pulled up in his truck, window down. "You two planning to solve the world's problems out here?" "Just talking," Jamal said. "Town's already buzzing," Pops said. "Local reporter called. Wants to do a story." Malik's eyes widened. "A story? Don't worry," Jamal said. "We'll make sure they focus on what matters." That night, the story went online. Headline: Road Vipers teach small town a lesson in friendship. The article didn't focus on leather or engines or stereotypes. It talked about a boy who stood alone until 70 strangers decided he shouldn't. It quoted the principle: "They taught us what showing up really means." By the next morning, the story had spread far beyond their town. Radio stations called. News crews wanted interviews. Jamal ignored most of them, but he couldn't stop the ripple that had already begun. At the clubhouse, the men gathered around the TV, watching clips from local news. The anchor spoke with a smile. One small act of friendship turned into a ride the whole country's talking about. Rocco chuckled. "We're famous for something good for once." Jamal leaned back in his chair. "Don't get used to it." Pops looked at him. "You think this will change anything?" Jamal thought about that for a long time. "Maybe not the world," he said. "But maybe it'll change how one kid walks into school tomorrow. That's enough." Later that afternoon, Jamal's phone buzzed. It was a number he didn't recognize. When he answered, a woman's voice said, "Mr. King, this is Keisha, Malik's mom." Her voice was warm but shaky. "I just wanted to thank you again." I got home, and he was already drawing pictures of the ride. I haven't seen him smile like that since before his dad left. Jamal's throat tightened. "He's a good kid. We didn't do much." "He did." "You did plenty," Keisha said softly. "You showed him that good men still keep promises." Jamal didn't have an answer for that. He just said, "Tell him to keep drawing." When the call ended, he sat there for a while, the phone still in his hand. He didn't feel proud. He felt human, like something old and hard in him had finally started to soften. Across town, Tyler sat at his kitchen table watching the same news story. His mom said, "That's sweet, isn't it?" he muttered. "Yeah." Without looking away, the clip showed Malik smiling, surrounded by bikers. Something inside him shifted. Guilt, envy, maybe both. He closed the laptop and stared out the window. Tomorrow. He thought maybe he'd try talking instead of laughing. And maybe that was the real power of what happened that day. Not the engines, not the headlines, but the quiet after. Because in that quiet, people started to listen. The next morning, the town felt lighter. People smiled more at stoplights. Strangers held doors open a little longer. It was as if one act of decency had cracked something open inside everyone. But at the school, something else was about to surface. Something that had been buried under months of silence. When Malik walked into class, a small crowd gathered around his desk. Kids who once ignored him now wanted to talk. A girl asked, "Was that your dad?" He laughed and said, "No, just my crew." Even the teachers looked different, not distant or rushed, but softer, more aware. The principal walked the halls herself that morning, greeting students, thanking staff. Change doesn't always need big speeches. Sometimes it starts with people simply paying attention. After recess, Ms. Hayes asked Malik to stay a moment. "I have something for you," she said. She handed him a thin folder with his name written on it in blue marker. Inside were copies of reports, ones she had filed months earlier about the bullying, notes from the nurse written after Malik's fall, emails between staff members, and one document dated 2 days before the accident that made her voice catch when she spoke. "I didn't see this until last night," she said. "The custodian, Mr. Thompson, had filed an incident report. He wrote that he saw Tyler and the other boys messing with that old scooter the morning you got hurt. He said they dared you to ride it." Malik's eyes widened. "They did, but I told them it was my idea." Ms. Hayes shook her head gently. "You were protecting them." Malik stared at the paper. "I just didn't want more trouble. You didn't cause it." She said, "You deserve people to know the truth." By lunchtime, the principal had the same folder open on her desk. The truth was simple. The bullies hadn't just laughed when Malik fell, they'd set him up. What followed was months of ignoring his complaints, hoping the problem would fade. Now, with the entire town watching, they couldn't hide anymore. Mrs. Brooks, the principal, looked out her office window at the playground below. "We should have listened," she whispered. The next day, a school meeting was called. Teachers, students, and parents gathered in the gym. The local news crew was there too, cameras rolling. Jamal and a few of the bikers stood quietly in the back, not to gloat, not to intimidate, just to support. Malik sat on the first row, legs swinging nervously. His mom sat beside him, hands clasped. The principal walked up to the microphone. "This past week reminded us what friendship truly means," she began. "It also reminded us that silence can be just as cruel as words." She held up the report folder. "We learned that one of our students, Malik, was injured not because of an accident, but because of a dare, because some students thought hurting someone would make them stronger." A hush fell over the room. The boys in question sat a few rows back, their parents beside them. Tyler's face was pale. His mom covered her mouth. Mrs. Brooks continued, "We ignored warning signs. We failed to protect him. But today, we take responsibility, and we thank those who reminded us what courage looks like." Her eyes flicked to the back of the room toward the men in leather jackets, standing silently against the wall. Jamal gave a small nod. Malik felt his heartbeat thumping in his ears. He didn't like the spotlight, but he didn't hide either. He just sat still like someone who'd finally stopped running. After the meeting, kids crowded around him again. This time, not out of curiosity, but respect. Some mumbled apologies, some offered smiles. And then Tyler came forward. He didn't bring his friends. He didn't have the swagger anymore, just quiet steps across the gym floor. Malik tensed, unsure what would happen. Tyler stopped in front of him. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," Malik replied. Tyler looked at the ground. "They said I should say sorry." He hesitated. But I don't want to just say it. I want to do something. Malik frowned. Like what? I asked the principal if I could help fix the old scooter you fell from, Tyler said. Maybe we can paint it, make it yours again. Malik blinked. You do that? Yeah, Tyler said. I was a jerk. You didn't deserve that. Malik looked down at his cast. The word brave stared back at him in thick marker lines. Okay, he said. We can fix it. Tyler smiled a little. It wasn't relief. It was gratitude. At the back of the gym, Jamal had watched the whole thing unfold. Pops whispered, "You see that?" Jamal nodded. Yeah. Pops grinned. Guess the kid just started his own ride. Later that afternoon, the news clip aired on TV. It showed Malik and Tyler shaking hands with the reporter's voice narrating, "Outlaws turned allies," and a small boy's courage changed an entire school. Jamal didn't watch it live. He was outside the clubhouse cleaning his bike when his phone buzzed. It was Keisha. "Did you see it?" she asked, her voice bright with pride. "Not yet," he said. "Well, they played your name on the news," she said. The reporter said Marcus King, known locally as Jamal, led the ride that turned Buddy Day into a movement. Jamal chuckled. "That's a fancy way to say I just showed up." "You did more than that," she said softly. "You gave my boy his voice back." When the call ended, Jamal sat there in the evening, quiet, the light fading across the asphalt. He thought about how strange it was, how one broken arm could fix so much more than it broke. At that same moment, miles away, Malik sat at his kitchen table with a marker in his hand, decorating the last corner of his cast. Across the top, he wrote 4 new words in big letters. "Never ride alone again," his mom smiled. "That's a good one." Jamal said it once. He replied, not with words, but when he showed up. A knock came at the door. Malik jumped up and ran to answer. Outside stood Tyler, holding the scooter, freshly cleaned, its frame repainted bright red. "I told you I'd fix it," Tyler said. Malik stepped out onto the porch, grinning. "Looks new. It's yours now," Tyler said. "My dad helped me with the wheels." For a long second, neither boy spoke. Then Malik reached out his good arm. Tyler shook it. No cameras, no teachers, no applause. Just 2 kids standing in the golden light of an ordinary afternoon, quietly rewriting what friendship meant to both of them. From his parked truck down the street, Jamal watched through the windshield, unseen. He didn't step out. He didn't need to. Pops, sitting beside him, smiled. "You think they'll make it stick?" Jamal exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he said. "Because it started with truth, and that never fades." The 2 men sat there watching the boys laugh, the red scooter glinting in the light. The world around them hadn't changed much. Bills still needed paying, roads still needed riding. But something small, something good had taken root. Maybe that's all change ever really needs. One brave kid, one honest apology, and a few people willing to listen when the engines go quiet. And in that moment, as the sun dipped low over the small town, Jamal realized something he hadn't in years. Redemption doesn't always come roaring in on 2 wheels. Sometimes it arrives softly in forgiveness, in truth, in the echo of a promise kept. By the end of the week, the town was still talking. But now it wasn't gossip. It was gratitude. What started as a quiet morning ride had turned into something bigger. People were donating scooters to the school. Parents were volunteering to supervise recess. A local mechanic even set up a Fix-It Friday for kids who wanted to learn how to repair old bicycles. And at the center of it all was Malik, the boy who had once stood alone behind a barbecue joint, asking strangers to be his buddies. The news stations came back that weekend, their cameras catching the newly painted scooter leaning proudly against the school fence. A reporter asked, How does it feel to be famous? Malik grinned. I'm not famous. I just got lucky with my crew. Behind him, Jamal and Pops stood in the background, quietly proud, refusing interviews. The attention didn't matter. The kid did. Back at the clubhouse, Rocco flipped through a newspaper and laughed. Would you look at that headline? Road Vipers teach town a lesson in humanity. Never thought I'd see those words together? Rico grinned. Guess we're turning soft. Pops shook his head. Nah, we just remembered we got hearts under all this leather. Jamal sat at the bar, sipping his coffee, watching them with a faint smile. He didn't say much, but everyone could tell something in him had shifted too. He looked lighter, like a man who'd finally found peace with a past that had followed him too long. A few days later, Jamal got a call from the police station. Officer Reed wanted to meet for coffee. They sat at a barbecue joint booth by the window. Two men from different worlds, but not so different anymore. Never thought I'd say this, Reed began. But you did a good thing, Jamal. That boy, he changed how people see you guys. Jamal shrugged. We just showed up. Reed leaned back. That's exactly it. Most people don't. Not when it matters. There was a pause. Then Jamal said quietly, You ever notice how people talk about bad men more than good ones? Reed nodded. Because good ones don't make noise. Jamal chuckled. Guess we made some noise anyway. When he got back to the clubhouse, he found a thick envelope on the counter. It was from the principal. Inside were thank you letters, all handwritten by the students. Marker drawings of bikes and smiles filled the pages. One said, Thank you for being kind even though you look scary. Another read, You made my buddy happy again. The last one stopped Jamal cold. You didn't just help Malik. You helped us all remember what brave looks like. Jamal folded that one carefully and put it in his vest pocket. That same night, Keisha stopped by the clubhouse with Malik. The boy carried a small box wrapped in brown paper. What's this? Jamal asked. Malik held it out shilly. A present for all of you. Inside was a framed drawing, the same one he'd been working on since the ride. It showed 70 bikes, a school, and the words crew rides together in bold letters across the sky. The men gathered around, speechless. Pops cleared his throat. You got real talent, kid, Malik smiled. Maybe one day I'll paint real ones. You will, Jamal said. Keisha stepped forward. We can't thank you enough. You changed how people see this town, how they see you. Jamal shook his head. We didn't change. We just remembered who we were supposed to be. Later that night, when everyone else had gone home, Jamal stayed behind alone. The drawing hung on the wall above the bar, now, the last light flickering against its colors. He thought about how it all started. A boy with a broken arm, too shy to look up, asking the simplest thing anyone can ask. Can you be my friend for one day? He'd said yes, because it felt like the right thing to do. But somehow that one, yes, had rippled farther than any of them imagined. It wasn't just about bikes or bullies or headlines. It was about what happens when people decide to care, when they choose presence over excuses. The next morning, the town mayor invited the group to a community event downtown. We're honoring people who made a difference this year, she said. You're on that list. Jamal hesitated. We don't do speeches. Then don't, she said with a smile. Just show up like you always do. So they did. On a clear Saturday morning, the Road Vipers rode into the town's square, slow, respectful, their engines purring like low thunder. Crowds lined the sidewalks, clapping, waving. For once, nobody crossed the street to avoid them. The mayor stepped up to the microphone. Sometimes, she said, the best lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. Today we honor a group of men who reminded us what loyalty, courage, and friendship really mean. Applause filled the air, Kids climbed on their parents' shoulders to see better. Malik sat in the front row, his cast finally gone, waving both hands high. Jamal walked up to the stage, shaking his head with a humble smile. "You don't have to do all this," he said. The mayor grinned. "We already did." Jamal turned to the crowd. "We're not saints," he said. "We're just people who saw someone who needed help and decided not to drive past." That line landed deeper than any fancy speech could. When the ceremony ended, the bikers didn't hang around for the cameras. They had coffee with the crowd, shook hands, then quietly rolled out of town the way they'd come in, leaving behind the same steady hum that had changed everything. Later that evening, Jamal rode alone for a while. The highway stretched wide, the sky deep orange. He thought about Malik, about his smile, about how something so small had turned into something that would outlive them all. As he pulled over to rest, his phone buzzed with a photo message. It was from Keisha. It showed Malik at home holding the rebuilt scooter. The caption said, "First ride tomorrow." Jamal smiled to himself. He could almost hear the kid laughing in the wind. He tucked his phone away, leaned back on his bike, and watched the sun slip below the hills. For once, the world didn't feel heavy. Maybe redemption didn't need noise or grand gestures. Maybe it was just about keeping your word and meaning it. And in a quiet southern town that had learned something about loyalty, everyone from kids to parents to bikers knew one thing for sure. If you show up for someone once, they'll remember it forever. Weeks passed. The town slowly settled back into its rhythm. School bells, grocery runs, evening walks, kids riding their scooters through the fading gold of late afternoon. But beneath that familiar routine, something new remained. Quiet but strong. A sense of connection that hadn't been there before. Malik's cast finally came off. His arm was thin, a little stiff, but healed. On the day the doctor removed it, he asked if he could keep it. When the nurse laughed and said, "Most kids don't want a souvenir," he smiled. "It's not about the cast," he said. "It's about what it means." Back home, he placed it on a shelf next to his drawing. The one that read, "Crew rides together." To him, it wasn't just a memory. It was proof that even a small voice could reach people no one expected to listen. Every Friday after school, 2 or 3 bikers would stop by the playground. Never loud, never in full gear, just casual visits. They helped fix flat tires, handed out popsicles, and sometimes just sat on the curb with kids who didn't have anyone waiting for them. The teachers stopped calling them those men, and started calling them the guys from the Friday crew. One afternoon, Malik showed up early to meet them. Jamal was already there working on an old mini-bike the group had found in a junkyard. He was trying to get the chain to stay in place, muttering under his breath. "Need help?" Malik asked, smiling. Jamal looked up. "You volunteering, partner?" Malik nodded, pulling out a small toolkit from his backpack, one that Pops had given him. They worked side by side for an hour, the sound of metal clicking, and the soft hum of distant traffic mixing into a comfortable silence. When they finished, Jamal turned the key. The small engine sputtered, then came to life. Malik's face lit up like sunrise. Jamal grinned. "Looks like you've got yourself a ride." Malik laughed. "I can't believe it works." Jamal stood back, arms crossed. "Told you, if something's worth fixing, you don't quit halfway." Later, the boy rode slow circles around the empty lot, his hair whipping in the wind, his laughter carrying across the air. It wasn't about speed or show. It was about freedom. The kind that comes when someone believes in you long enough for you to believe in yourself. "From the bench," Pop said quietly. "Kid rides like he was born to." Rocco nodded. "Looks like he's one of us now." Jamal smiled. He always was. That Friday, the school held a small assembly to thank the community for their support. The principal spoke briefly about kindness, about how one act had reminded everyone that empathy is contagious. Then she looked toward Malik. "This young man taught us something," she said. "That friendship isn't about who looks tough or who fits in. It's about who shows up." The audience applauded, but Malik didn't stand or bow. He just looked over his shoulder toward the back of the gym where Jamal and the bikers stood quietly watching. Afterward, when everyone was leaving, Jamal found himself surrounded by students wanting to shake hands or ask questions about the bikes. One girl said, "My dad said bikers are bad guys, but you're not bad." Jamal smiled. "Your dad's half right. We used to be bad at listening, but we're working on it." The girl giggled and ran off. That night, Jamal stopped by Keisha's house to drop off some bike parts Malik had ordered. When she opened the door, the smell of dinner filled the air, something home-cooked and warm. "Come in," she said. "You can stay for a meal." He hesitated, then stepped inside. It was simple. Wooden chairs, a checkered tablecloth, family photos on the wall. Nothing fancy, but everything that mattered. Malik ran in from the living room. "Jamal, you have to see this." He held up his latest drawing, the mini bike, the school, and himself wearing a small leather jacket that said Little Viper across the back. Jamal laughed. "That's new." "Rocco came up with it," Malik said proudly. "He said I earned it." "Well," Jamal said, "I'd say he's right." They sat down for dinner, talking about small things. How the school was quieter now, how Tyler had joined the Fix-It Fridays. How Malik wanted to design motorcycle logos when he grew up. It was the kind of talk that didn't need meaning to matter. When dinner was done, Malik walked Jamal to the porch. The evening air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. "Do you think people can change?" Malik asked suddenly. Jamal thought about it for a long moment before answering. "Yeah," he said finally, "but not all at once. It's like learning to ride. You fall, you fix, you try again. Change doesn't happen fast. It just happens honest." Malik nodded, thinking it over. "Then I guess we all changed a little?" Jamal smiled. "You started it, partner." As he walked back to his bike, the streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows down the road. Jamal glanced over his shoulder. Malik was still standing there waving. He lifted a hand in return before the night swallowed the sound of his engine. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at the clubhouse. Thick paper, gold seal. It was from the Department of Education. Inside was a simple note. In recognition of outstanding service to community and youth engagement, the Road Vipers Motorcycle Club, Local Chapter 45, is hereby commended for their contribution to moral education. Rocco stared at the letter for a full minute before speaking. "We just got thanked by the government." Pops grinned. "Guess hell froze over." Jamal laughed quietly. "Guess we're doing something right." They framed the letter and hung it next to Malik's drawing. Two reminders, one from a child, one from the world, that even rough hands can do gentle work. As the months rolled by, the crew rides together project spread to nearby towns. Other biker clubs picked it up, visiting schools, mentoring kids, fixing playgrounds. Nobody planned it. It just grew like good things often do. And in the middle of it all, one boy kept showing up, riding his small red scooter, smiling, waving at the men who had once been strangers. Sometimes at night, Jamal would stop by the old barbecue joint, the same place where the story began. The neon lights flickered softly, and the coffee tasted the same as it always had. But the quiet inside him was different now. He'd watch the road through the window, long, endless, open, and think about how it all started with 7 simple words. "Can you be my friend for one day?" He whispered them again, Not out of sadness, but gratitude, because that question had given him something he hadn't realized he was missing: purpose. And in a world that often moved too fast, maybe that was the rarest gift of all, to be asked for kindness, and to discover that answering it could change your own life, too. Months later, the seasons turned. Summer's heat gave way to cool air and long shadows. The trees lining the town streets began to rust with gold and amber, and the wind carried that crisp sound only autumn can make. Dry leaves skimming across asphalt. Life had settled into something quiet and meaningful. Malik was taller now. The scar on his arm had faded into a soft line that caught the light when he waved. The scooter sat out front of his house, cleaner than anything else in the yard, waiting for another ride. Every now and then, people still stopped to talk about that morning. They'd mentioned the sound of 70 engines, the silence that followed, and how it felt like the whole town had inhaled hope and never fully exhaled it. But to Jamal, it wasn't about the morning anymore. It was about what came after, the small changes nobody posted online, the quiet gestures no one recorded, the way people had started noticing each other again. On Fridays, the crew rides together crew still visited the school. Sometimes it was just 3 of them, sometimes 10. They'd fix a flat tire, repaint a playground bench, share lunch with the kids. No press, no cameras, just men doing what they promised. One chilly afternoon, Jamal sat on the playground bench, watching Malik help a younger boy learn to ride. The little kid fell twice, and Malik picked him up each time, brushing off his knees. "Try again," Malik said, smiling. "You'll get it." Jamal leaned back, feeling the weight of that moment, how the lesson had gone full circle. The boy who once needed help was now the one giving it. Rocco came up behind him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're quiet today." Jamal took one, nodded toward the kids. "Just watching the road keep going." Rocco grunted. "You think they'll remember us?" Jamal smiled faintly. "Not us, no, but they'll remember how it felt." "That's better." They sat in silence, the kind that doesn't need words. A light breeze moved through the yard, and a small piece of paper fluttered by Jamal's boot. He picked it up. It was one of the kids' drawings, stick figures on bikes, a crooked sun overhead, the words, "Good people ride too," scrolled in crayon. He smiled. "Guess we made the yearbook after all." That evening, the group rode out of town together one more time. Not for a cause, not for show, just a ride for the sake of it. The sky was painted orange and blue, the air cold enough to sting. They didn't talk much over the engines, they didn't have to. Jamal led the pack down the familiar highway, headlights stretching ahead like a trail of stars. The wind tore at his jacket, but he didn't feel the chill, only the warmth of knowing where he'd been and why it had mattered. When they reached the overlook outside town, the group pulled over. The view stretched for miles, a patchwork of fields, lights twinkling in the distance, the world wide open. Pops broke the silence. "You ever think how it all started with one kid?" Jamal nodded slowly. "Yeah, one kid, one question." Rocco lit a cigarette but didn't smoke it. He just held it between his fingers, watching the horizon. "Can't believe how something so small turned everything upside down." Jamal chuckled. "Not upside down, maybe just the right way up." They stayed there until the sky turned indigo. Nobody wanted to leave first. Finally, Jamal said, "All right, boys, time to roll." They rode back in a slow line, their taillights glowing red in the dark. Not symbols of rebellion this time, but of guidance like tiny beacons leading the way home. Meanwhile, across town, Malik sat at his bedroom window, listening to the faint sound of engines fading in the distance. His sketchbook lay open on his lap. On the newest page, he had drawn himself on his mini-bike, riding beside Jamal. At the bottom, He had written a sentence that felt like a prayer, even though it wasn't one. They showed up, so I will too. He looked out at the sky, wide, quiet, endless, and whispered, "Thank you." The next morning, his mother found the drawing taped to the fridge. She smiled, touched it gently, and whispered back, "They'll always show up." Weeks later, before winter set in, the school hosted a small event. They renamed the annual Buddy Day. Now it was called Respect Day. The banner stretched across the gym read, "One day can change everything." The bikers didn't attend that year. They didn't need to. The kids carried their story forward on their own. Every classroom made projects about kindness, about standing up, about what friendship really means. Malik gave a short speech, simple, honest. "They didn't make me brave," he said. "They just helped me remember I already was." The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was steady, the kind that carries meaning instead of noise. That evening, as the sun went down, Jamal parked his bike outside the barbecue joint where it had all begun. The same dusty lot, the same flickering neon sign. Inside, the same waitress poured coffee, older but still quick with a smile. "You're early tonight," she said. "Didn't want to miss the quiet," Jamal replied. He sat by the window, the reflection of the fading sky on the glass. On the wall behind him hung a photo someone had framed months ago, the one from that first morning at the school. The boy with his cast standing beside 70 bikers, his small smile brighter than the chrome around him. Jamal looked at it for a long time. Then he whispered. He asked for one day. We gave him forever. He finished his coffee, left a few bills on the table, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the light fading to blue. Across the street, a group of teenagers laughed beside their bikes. Not Kawasaki's, just regular ones, the kind you ride to school. One kid wore a leather jacket too big for him, covered in patches he'd sewn himself. On the back, one patch stood out. Ride for good. Jamal smiled. Maybe this was how it worked. One good act passed like a flame, lighting the next, then the next. He started his engine, the familiar rumble filling the quiet. He didn't rev it. He didn't need to. The sound was enough. Steady, human, alive. As he pulled away, the narrator's voice, soft, reflective, rose over the hum of the road. People say the world is full of bad men. Maybe they just never met the ones who chose to change. The scene widened, Malik waving from his front yard, his hand raised high as the line of bikes disappeared into the horizon. The sky blazed orange and gold. The engines grew faint, then silent, and for a few long seconds there was nothing but wind, sunlight, and the echo of kindness. Text appeared across the screen. Would you have been that child's friend? The image faded to black. Silence. Then, just before the credits rolled, the faintest sound. A single engine starting again. Because some promises never really end.